Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're gonna be building a photography portfolio website. You can find the full source code in the description below. The source code is about $3 or $5. You can buy it to support my channel, or you can buy a membership for $5 a month. We're going to use Framer Motion for the animations, and we will write pure CSS in most cases. The only thing we're gonna use from the Sass is the nested structure we give to the code. Now this project is not for completely beginners. I'm not going to explain how Flex works, but we're gonna use simple CSS, and I will try to explain how we create our components. But my point is, I'm not going full in depth. We have to create 4 pages, the menu, the carousel with the photographies, and this video is gonna be already too long. Now let's start by creating our project. We need to create our next app, so let's do that. And finally we want to delete the yarn log file, delete the node modules, and reinstall those. But before that, I will install Framer Motion in Sass, and we're going to need React icons too. Now let's rename our CSS file to .css and fix the typos in the pages folder. We need to create a component folder, and the first component I will create is the page wrapper. Now I will bring the page wrapper to our app.js file, and I'm gonna pass the component inside the page wrapper. Our page wrapper component will be our layout. Let's break in animate presence too from Framer Motion, and we need the mode to be weight. Now if you go to theframer.com, you will see that animate presence allows components to animate out when they're removed from the React tree. Now in the page wrapper we need the key, and our key will be the path name of the URL. We can see everything is working fine. Let's create our first style file, and let's import it to our page wrapper. Now as you can see, we have an effect that if we hover to some components, that particular development gets black. Now in order to do that, I'm going to use a context so we can avoid to pass around props. Now let's create our background context. And we need the actual background variable and the setBackground function. I assume you know how to create the basic context. And now let's create a custom hook so we can use our context more easily. Now let's bring in our background context, and everything else will be inside of that. I'm gonna pass the children to the div element I just created. And now let's reset all the styling. We need margin 0, padding 0, box sizing border box. I'm going to import some fonts too. And the usual stuff. We want list style none, text decoration none for the links. We need the font width, some custom colors, and we want the scroll behavior to be smooth. We obviously want black background and white text, and the overflow X must be hidden. Let's remove the border from all the buttons, and we need the cursor to be a pointer. Now in the page wrapper, we want to have a navbar, the black animation stuff, and later in the middle we want to have the children. Now let's create the animation. We need two circles. The first circle will be a light color and the second circle will be a dark color. Let's create the styling and import it. And let's import the use background custom hook we created so we can access the context. I'm going to create the first gradient circle. The second development will be the dark circle. If the background is false, the dark circle will have an opacity of 1, and if the background is true, the opacity basically will be 0. We want the container to be fixed, and I'm going to paste the background color. It will be a radial gradient, and we want to do the same with the dark gradient circle too, but the only difference will be it will have an opacity of 0. Of course, the background will be more dark, and we're going to have a transition so we can create the effect that everything is getting darker. Let's import the gradient circle, and let's test the animation. Go to the Next.js file and import the useBackground hook. Now on mouse center, I'm going to set the background to true, and on mouse leave, I'm going to set the background to false. As you can see, everything is working great, so now we can move on. Now let's start by styling the container of the page wrapper. We want everything to be a column. We want the page to grow to the full width and height. And we want everything to be contained if the screen gets more than 90-20 pixels. Now let's create the Navbar and import it to the page wrapper. We're going to use the animate presence and the motion component for the framer. And of course, we need to create the style file and import it. We need the link component, and I'm going to use some icons from the React Icons package. Let's import useState and the useBackground hook, and later we're going to create the profile component too. Now the first thing I will do is to create an opacity animation. In the hidden state we're going to have an opacity of 0, and I'm going to define some properties for the transition. Now in the visible state, of course, we need opacity of 1. Now I will create an Navbar animation. Most things can be replicated in pure CSS, but for the purpose of this video, I'm going to use framer motion only. Now let's create the visible state, and we need a navbar item animation for each individual link in the navbar menu. Of course, we need a hidden state and a visible state too. Now I will show you what we will build. Finally, we need an animation for the black background next to the navigation menu. We will animate the width property. We're going to need the use background, and we're going to create a state for the navigation. Now let's start by creating the navbar. The initial state is hidden. We want the anime to be visible, and the exit will be hidden again. Let's create our logo. We need the link and the tag inside of the link. Now I'm going to paste the onMouse center and the onMouse sleeve properties. And I'm going to paste all the links we need: home, showcase, clients, and contact. Next to the link, we need the button so we can use the mobile navbar. And finally, we need a button for the profile component. Now let's create the mobile navbar. If the nav is open, I'm going to render the list. Let's remove the previous stuff. And before we continue, let's style the basic navbar for the desktop users. Let's style our container first. We want to be fixed, and we want a z-index of 20. Of course, we need space between the objects. Here you can see how it looks. and we want it to be flex in a media screen of 768 pixels. Let's style our logo now. We have nothing special here. Font size of 2.2, some color. Now let's style our list. We want it to be flex. We want a gap, some padding, and the list item we want it to be hidden in mobile devices. Now let's style the tag. We want it to be small. We want some color, some transition, and a hover effect. We want the buttons to be transparent background, display flex, justify content center, and align self-center. And we're ready for now. As you can see, it's the same as the completed website. Now let's continue with the mobile navigation bar. Let's add the animation. We want initial hidden, animate visible, and exit hidden. And inside of the nav component and inside of the nav tag, you want a close button. On click, we're gonna close the navigation, and I'm gonna add the F8 times icon. Now we need the links, and I'm gonna add the animation we created. The animation is Navbar item animation. And on click, we want to close the navigation too. And now I'm gonna paste the rest of the links. Now let's create the mobile navigation background. I'm gonna add the animation here too. The animation is navbar background animation, and on click we want to close the navbar. Let's copy the initial, the animate, and the hidden properties. And the last thing we need is the profile component. Now we want everything in here to live in the animate presence component. Now let's style the mobile navigation stuff. In the beginning we want everything to be hidden, and in mobile devices we want it to be flexed, fixed positioned. We want all the height, 300 pixels, and black background. And in smaller devices we want the full width, and we want it to be flex direction column. We need some padding. The close button, we want the cursor to be pointer, some padding. We want to justify the content to flex end. We need some margin, background transparent, and of course we need the hover and the focus effect. The SVG, we want it to be white, and we need the transition. Now let's style the links. Of course we want it to be a column, centered. The UL2, flex direction column, and align items, flex start, and we need some gap. And of course finally we want to style the actual A tag. Very simple stuff: font size, font weight, hover and focus effect. Now for the mobile nav background, we want it to be fixed, and we want it to be width 100, height 100 VH. We want black background with lower opacity, and we want it to be hidden at first, and in mobile devices we need it to be block. As you can see here, everything is working properly. So the navigation is ready. Now we want to create the profile component for the 3 dots button. Let's create the profile component. I'm gonna import to the Navbar. We want of course to create a style file, import it to the profile component. We want to import the image, the link, and some React icons, the close button and arrow right icon. And we want a set profile prop. The component we want to build is this thing. Let's create our class names. Inside of the profile component, we want of course a close button. On click we're going to set the profile to false. We want an image container so we can show the image. We want object fit cover, layout fill, and width and height of 100%. And we're going to link the profile image. We want trackable to be false, and I'm going to add an alt property. The layout must be responsive, sorry. Now we need some text, our name, and we need the paragraph to show some stuff. I'm gonna paste all of this. And finally, we want a link to the contact page. I'm going to create a set profile state, and I'm gonna pass the set profile to the profile component. If the profile is true, we're going to render the profile component. And I'm gonna paste the variants, the initial property, the animate, and the exit. And we need on pan end, if the X offset is greater than 0, we need to close the profile and set the background to true. Of course, we need to open the profile if we click the 3 dots button. Let's add the class name and let's create the styling. We want the profile to be fixed position, we want it to be right 0, and we want touch action to none. Let's start by styling the actual profile component. We want flex direction column, cursor grab. We want it to be full width for small devices. We need to style the close button, very basic stuff. We need to add a background color to the container. And now let's style the image and the text. We want it to be flex direction column, we need some margin. We want the image container to be 150 pixels. %50 border radius so we can create a circle. And we're going to absolute position the text on top of the image. Now let's style the actual text. I'm gonna paste the font size and the color. Now let's style the description. Simple stuff. And the only thing that's left is the button. I'm gonna align it to the flex end. We need display flex, align item center, some gap, font size of 1 rem. We want it to be white. And we need a transition on hover and on focus. I'm gonna move it to the right 4 pixels. We need to make the icon a little bit bigger. And we need a color of white. And of course, a transition. Now we're done with the navbar. The next thing we want to create is the footer. Let's do that. Let's import it to the page wrapper and let's create a style file. Of course, import the file. Import motion from Framer. And let's create the opacity animation again. I'm going to paste it multiple times. Of course, you can change the code. I'm going to add the class name and of course the variants, the initial and the animate and exit property. Let's create a list of links. And I'm going to paste all the social links. And next to the links we want a copyright text. We want everything to be fixed again to the bottom. We need full width, some padding, space between the content, and we want the background to become black in smaller screens. And finally we want it to become a column so it can fit in screens of less than 500 pixels. Now let's style the list. We want it to be flex, we need gap, we need some padding, we will change the color, the font size, the font weight. I'm gonna add some letter spacing, and of course we're going to create a simple transition on hover and on focus. And finally, we're going to style the copyright span tag. And the basic layout is ready. Now let's start by creating the homepage. First of all, I'm gonna show you the homepage. We have the video and some text rotated with some animations. Let's import motion and animate presence, and let's start by creating the video animation. I want opacity 0 and scale 1.1. And in the visible state we want opacity 1 and scale 1. Let's create a height animation for the lines in the center. And let's create a simple opacity animation. Now in the main tag we will create an outer container that contains a div element, and in the div element I'm gonna inject the video tag with the dangerously set inner HTML property. The reason I'm using that is that Safari browser has some troubles playing the video. Now let's style the home page. We need flex, column, center, and in the container we want overflow hidden, a min height of 100 VH. In the dot main we need flex, flex direction column, justify content center, the usual stuff. As you can see, the video is playing, so everything is fine for now. The next step is to create the lines with the text. Now for the content div, we want to create 3 columns, and in the center column I will create the 2 lines. Let's do position absolute, full width and height, and display grid. We want grid template columns, repeat 3, 1 FR, and user select none. In the .call class we're gonna do display flex, justify content center, align item center, and the center class where you're going to do position relative. As you can see, everything is split perfectly. We have 3 columns. Now I'm gonna do the center column from div to motion.div, and we have variants, hide animation, initial hidden, animate visible, and exit hidden. Let's create the first line. Inside that line we're going to have the animate presence component, and in that I will put a link to showcase and the A tag. Inside the A tag we're gonna put the text we want and the on mouse center and on mouse leave properties for the background. Now for the second line I'm gonna copy the first line and I'm gonna paste it, and I'm gonna change the text and the classes. Let's style the A tag. We want transition, color, padding, the usual stuff. And now let's style the line. We want the full height, 1 pixel width, a gray background, and you can see the line is drawn. I'm gonna create a media screen for smaller screens, and I'm gonna position the line to top 50, left 50, and I'm going to change the width of the span. Now for the link container, I'm gonna do position absolute, and in the center class name I'm gonna change the justify content center to space between. I'm sorry. Now you can see how the 2 lines have space between them. Let's continue with the link container. I'm gonna do writing mode vertical so I can rotate the text. And we're gonna do transform rotate 180 degrees and translate text 35%. We're gonna do flex direction column, and we're gonna use some gap, and of course a hover and a focus property. Now the numbers I use, I found them by testing different one every time, so you can copy exactly the code I'm showing you. And of course I'm gonna create a media screen. I'm gonna use writing mode horizontal, and I'm gonna put 0 to rotation. I'm gonna copy the whole link container and I'm gonna change it to link container 2. And the only things I'm gonna change are the numbers in translate X and Y. And now we are done with the home page. We will continue with the showcase page. Now I'm gonna show you the website so you can remember what we're gonna build. Let's create the showcase.js file. Let's import the style file, motion, animate presence, image, and the use state. Inside the pages, we are gonna use a page layout component. We will not use this component inside the home page. So create the page layout.js file, pass the children, import it to the showcase page, and wrap the text with the page layout component. Let's create a style file and import it to the page layout. Import motion and animate presence from Framer Motion, and we're going to create a height animation just as the home page. And of course, we're going to use an opacity animation too. We're going to use some properties. The first property is the large title, and the second property is the small title. We're gonna follow the same layout as the home page. We're gonna use 3 columns, and in the second column we're going to create 2 lines. The first line will contain the text, and in between the lines the content will live there. course, in the second line too, we're gonna pass the height animation. Here I mistyped children. Now let's style the page layout. We want grid. The first and the last column we want to be 120 pixels, and we're gonna do some media screen stuff. In the second column we want space between, just as the home page. And here you can see the result. Now in the showcase page, I'm gonna add the small title and the large title, and we're gonna style those two. We're gonna do some absolute positioning for the mobile devices for the first line, and we're gonna do display none to the second line. Now I will do sticky positioning for the text. I'm gonna rotate it. I'm gonna add some gap, flex direction column, justify content center, align item center. And for the smaller screens, I'm gonna rotate it again, and I'm gonna use the translate Y and X property. Now for the text inner class, I'm gonna do column, and finally for the small and the large class, we're gonna do font size and font weight, and some media screen too. Here you can see the result. The only thing that's left is to style the content. For the content we want with 100% and some padding, and for the inner class name we're gonna do some margin. Now we're done with the page layout, so we can continue to create the showcase page. We are going to create a description component for the showcase with the opacity animation, and I'm gonna use it in the showcase component. Now let's style the description, and let's start by creating the carousel component for the photographies. Let's create an image container. And on click, I'm gonna set the carousel, and inside that we're gonna have the image component. Let's create the state for the carousel. We need two properties, the isOpen property and the index. Let's create a container for the album. We're gonna use the opacity animation, and let's map all the photos. Now let's style the album. We want max width, margin top, and we're gonna do display grid, and we need two columns. For the smaller screens, we're gonna do flex direction column. For the image container, we need full width, automatic height, and we're gonna do a hover effect for the image itself. Here I forgot to type return in the image container. So now we are able to see all the images. Now let's start by creating the carousel. If the carousel is open, we will render the component, and we're gonna pass the sources table state and the set state. Let's create the styling file and import it to the carousel component. We're gonna use an opacity animation, an image animation, and we're gonna pass all the properties, the source table, the state, and the set state. We will create a function, so if we are at the last photo, it will return to the first one, and if we are the first one, it will return to the last one, depending if we click next or previous. Now I'm going to create a use effect, and I'm going to create a function, and I will name it handle scroll. If we scroll, the carousel will close. Let's add the event listener and return remove event listener. Let's create a use effect for the buttons too. If the key is arrow right, move to the next photo. If it's arrow left, move to the left photo. And of course, we're gonna check if a next photo exists. If it doesn't, it will go back to the first photo as explained previously. Now let's add the past animation to the container of the carousel, and we're gonna add an on-pan property. If the offset of x is greater than 0, we're gonna move to the next photo. If it's not, we're gonna move to the previous photo. And let's add the previous button and a next button. Inside the animate presence component, we're going to render the image component, and the source will be the sources table state.index. As you can see, everything is working perfectly. The only thing that's left is to style the carousel. Of course, we wanted position fixed, a black background, full width and height, display flex, the usual. And for the close button, we wanted absolute positioned. And we want the SVG to be 2.2 rem, and I'm gonna add a transition too. Let's add background transparent. For the previous and the next button, we want background transparent, absolute positioned, full height, display flex, justify content center, align item center. We're going to create some media screen for the padding. And the inner of that contains the button. I'm gonna paste the properties. There's nothing special, some padding, background, outline. As you can see, the buttons are there. And finally, for the next button, we want it to be left 100% and transform translate text -100. Now let's style the div that contains the image. We want 80% width and 90% height, and we want the inner to expand to that width and height. Of course, I made some typos, so let's go and fix them. Here is +1 and down is -1. Let's go and fix the scroll event listener. We need to change the Windows screen Y to scroll Y. And let's add an escape handle key down. If the user press escape, the carousel will close. And finally, we're done with the showcase page. Let's move to the client's page. Create the client's file and the client's style file. Import it, import page layout, motion, the usual stuff. I'm gonna add the page layout, a small title and a large title. And we will create a description. We're gonna use the opacity animation. And we're going to create a title div, and inside of that I'm gonna put some text. I'm going to create a second div element, and inside of that I'm gonna paste some paragraphs. Let's use the description component and let's style it. We're gonna do flex, gap, and the margin, and I'm gonna paste some media screen. For the title we want the full width, and for the smaller screens we want half the width. For the text we're gonna change the font size and the color. Now let's style the paragraphs. We want flex direction column, some gap, the full width, and we're gonna change for the p tag the color and the font size. Now let's create some more animations. The animations obviously are optional, but you can follow the code. we want to do this stuff here. Now let's create a testimonial component. We want the profession, the name, the testimonial, and the profile source for the image. We're going to return emotion div, pass the animation, and inside of that we have the name that contains the profession and the name, and of course the photo. Later we need the testimonial, some stars, and inside the p tag we're gonna pass the testimonial. Let's create a testimonials container. And let's create a column. I'm gonna paste some testimonials. Let's create a second column. I'm gonna paste some more testimonials. And finally, in the third column, I'm gonna do the same. Let's start by styling the testimonial. We're gonna absolute position the photo and we will transform it to a circle. For the text, we're gonna change some properties, nothing special. We want to change the background. For the container, we're gonna add some padding, display flex, flex direction column, align items, flex end. And for the testimonials container, we're gonna do grid with 3 columns. We're gonna add the gap of 4 rems, margin bottom 6 rem, and we're going to create some media screens. So in smaller screens, it will become a column. And for the last column, I'm going to style it as grid for less than 50-100 pixels, and later I'm gonna style it as column. Now I'm gonna show you what we did. Here you can see the last column. And finally everything is becoming a column. Now we're done with the client's page too. The only thing that's left is the contact page. Let's create the contact file. And of course the style file too. Let's import it to the contact. We will need the page layout and the motion from Framer. I'm gonna paste the opacity animation in the description. And I'm going to create the page layout. We need the small title and the large title. I'm gonna paste those two. And let's style the description. Nothing special here. And now let's create the actual form. Import the form to the contact and use it. Let's create the style file for the form, import it to the form component. I'm gonna paste the opacity animation here too. And let's start by creating a detail component. We'll use it for the telephone and the other stuff. We need an icon and the children. I'm gonna show you right now. Now let's create an input container. Inside of that we will need the label, the HTML4, the placeholder, the error if it exists, and a text area boolean. Let's create the label. The input. If the text area is true, we're gonna render text area tag. If it's not, we're gonna render an input tag. And if there is an error, we're gonna render the error. Let's paste some default properties. And now let's create the form. We're going to use the opacity animation. Let's create a container for the details. I'm gonna paste all those details. And let's create the form. On submit, we're gonna prevent the default action and we'll give it a class name. And now we need an input container for the name, for the email. for the phone, for the message, and finally we need a button for the submit action. Now let's style all those things. We're gonna do flex, gap, the usual stuff, some media screen, give a styling to the h3 and 2 tags, and for the details we're going to do display flex direction column, we're going to use gap and width of max content. For the detail container we're going to do display flex, align item center, we're going to use a gap, and for the smaller screens we're going to do flex direction column. For the icon container we want it to be a circle and a bigger SVG. For the actual form we're gonna do the full width and we want it to be a column. Now for the input container we want the width to be 100% and we're gonna hide the label. We're gonna do some padding. We want the background to be transparent. The user stuff, we want white characters, some border radius, and the text area we want the resize property to be none and some height. Now let's style the submit button. Align self flex end, some padding, background transparent, some border, and font weight 600. And of course we're gonna do a hover and a focus effect. Let's do color gray. And let's use the form component in the client's page too. And we're done with the whole website. If you like the video, you can leave a like, subscribe to my channel, and if you want to support me, you can buy a membership or buy the source code. In the next video I will upload, we're gonna use style components so we can try different things.